Hey, what up? This is Zach Guilford from Midnight Mass, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Pop Culture Pastor.
Pop Culture Pastor.
Hello. This is Pop Culture Pastor. My name is Dave. Cody's not here. He's on strike. He went on strike. He's holding out for better pay.
All the pay. Greetings and salutations.
Cody's back. He went across the lines. He's a scab.
That's hurtful.
I saw that, or I heard that James Gunn is going to be a scab. That he's going to continue to write his Superman script.
Oh yeah,
Even with the strike. I wonder how do they react to that, like the other writers? Or is he just a guy who happens to write, but he doesn't really consider himself a writer?
I think he's a jack of all trades, maybe master of none.
I thought you were going to say something else.
But so I think with him being the head honcho at DC, they need him to write.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the writer's strike stuff. I know that that's the big talking point right now. That's the big thing going on. That I didn't plan on talking about this. It just kind of was on my mind when we hit the record button.
Just like Willie Nelson.
What did Willie Nelson do?
You were always on his mind.
Yes. You didn't sing it, but now I can't get it out of my head.
You're welcome.
All right, stop. You were always on my mind. Okay. I'm sorry, I had to get that out. I couldn't. You ever do that when someone brings up a song and then you can't move on until you've sang the line?
There's a certain Beatles song that I will not mention because I don't want it stuck in my head. So yes.
I thought you were going to say there's a certain mental condition you have, Dave. That's called.
No.
Yeah, so the whole writer strike thing, I remember thinking this when it happened the last time.
Like
are these
in
guys not
08?
Are these guys not getting paid?
Evidently it's because of streaming.
Yeah.
Streaming has changed the ratio of payment to not so good. I think this also happened with musicians that were singer-songwriters, but evidently they have better deals.
Yeah. The pay disparity is fascinating to me because we've talked about this before with the MCU, Marvel Studios, who are using stories and characters created by comic creators back in the 90s. They're making billions of dollars, and then they're sending these guys $2,000 thank you checks. And it's
here is 2 G's and a free Iron Man hoodie. You're welcome.
Hey, thank you, sir, for creating the Winter Soldier. Here's a bottle of champagne and, a magazine. Right? Exactly. That stuff is fascinating, and I wonder how they can get away with that. Listen, when we go see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 later on,
It's happening.
we will sit through 8 minutes of credits minimum with thousands of names.
And never once have I seen my last name.
Really? Never once?
It's so disappointing.
Me either. I have a pretty unique last name, though. But the point is that it takes a lot of people to create these things.
Word.
And there's billions of dollars being made. And then you hear about some of these other people who, I just assume the writers are getting paid. But maybe they aren't. Not when I say getting paid, I'm sure they're getting paid, but are they making the kind of money that you would think would be necessary for someone who's coming up with the story?
So, in my mind, I could see it being maybe oh, here's a nice fat check. You're good. Where Stephen King, I can go buy Pet Cemetery right now, and he's still going to cash in on some of that. He gets royalties, and stuff. And so I think with the streaming, they're not getting that sweet royalty check at the end of each month.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me too. A writer, So even a screenwriter, someone you hire to write the script, I would think that since they have some sort of intellectual ownership over that, that they would get royalties.
Yeah.
That they would get some cut of the money made from the story they wrote.
M. Night should still be cashing in on his screenwriting abilities for Stuart Little.
Did he write that?
Yes. The screenplay.
Wow.
He adapted it for the films.
That's wild. Who knew? There wasn't even a twist ending in Stuart Little.
Well, he didn't direct it, so
okay.
He didn't get to control the twist ending.
Right. Yeah, anyways, so I guess my biggest thing with the writer's strike is I'm not aware. I just don't know all the information in that, which is probably why I don't understand how I should feel about it. What shows are affected? You mentioned Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live is canceled until they have come to a resolution.
You'll be missed.
Pete Davidson was supposed to host. Not anymore.
Bye, Pete.
It's Peter before 11 a.m. if you're listening.
What?
That's what he says in the Taco Bell commercial. I know Stranger Things is being affected by it.
Is it really? Oh,
and
no.
That's a big thing.
Oh, no.
So there were a few other shows. I know that the writers for Ted Lasso were picketing, but they've already filmed.
So yeah, that was interesting. I follow a guy on Twitter who this was his first credit was this week's Ted Lasso episode.
Nice.
So he's out there celebrating his first piece of work out there, hitting like a lot of eyes and then picketing with the writers. And so it was interesting to me. It's kind of a fascinating juxtaposition.
Yeah. So, I mean, anything that has not been filmed yet really is at risk because some shows, they do bring in the writers to adjust if something's not working out well as they're filming. And so, like, even if a script is done, you may not have filming starting because there's no one to adapt and correct unless you're James Gunn, and then you do whatever you want.
The kids in Stranger Things are going to be like 35 by the time that final season comes out. Hey, you want to go play D&D? It's cool if you don't. Yeah. So, right. Okay. Well, I hope it gets figured out quickly. I have sensed that this is not the first time that the changing face of how we take in this entertainment has kind of affected the money flow in kind of maybe a greedy bad way, where the movie companies, the show companies are keeping a lot of that excess money and using the new ways to get that into people's eyes to maybe kind of divert the flow of some of that money. So
the Black Widow movie.
Yeah, that was a good example.
They
and
put it straight to streaming, and Scarlett Johansson didn't get the cash flow from having it in cinema.
Scarlett Johansson, number one in our hearts, and yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But okay, so I want to keep it kind of in the MCU, in the Marvel Studios area, because there's something that popped earlier this week that I'd like to talk about. And that is, I follow scoopers. Do you know are you familiar with scooper culture, spoiler culture?
Oh, so I was thinking like the people that pick up dog doo-doo.
Oh, no,
Those
not
scoopers.
them, not the people that work at Cold Stone, not ice cream scoopers.
That is the more preferable of the scooping.
Yeah, that is. That is. And now I'm just thinking about Cold Stone Creamery and some ice cream and, giving them $1 and letting them sing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they sing when you tip them. Did you know that?
I have only been to Cold Stone like once.
Sometimes when they're really busy, it's fun to tip them because their heart's not in it. And they start singing, but they're like, I should have been gone. Oh, Sherry, Out of love. Get out. I don't know. They don't sing that song.
I was going to say, why are they singing from the lead singer of Journey?
Steve Perry. Because it's fun. Because it's just fun. So a lot of some big Marvel news reared its head this week. Marvel is in a weird place.
They're shutting down their studios.
We're about
heard it here first.
I mean, like we joke, but they're in a pretty significant time for the future of the brand. I think the brand has been damaged in a way with everything that's gone on Phase 4. Jonathan Majors, kind of all of this happening all at once. I think the brand has been it's fair to say it's been slightly damaged. So they need a win. And Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is sitting right around like 60-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, high 60s, right?
Critics.
Yeah. It's okay. The Rotten Tomatoes scores are okay.
Better than some of the previous movies in this phase. So
yeah. Like, look, I'll just say it. This movie has to be better than Ant-Man Quantumania. It just has to be.
I already know it will be.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're confident. And I think it will be too, but we'll see here in mere hours. But the big news that popped off in this desperate time for the Marvel Studios, that was probably a reach, but is that there's the scooper community. Some of the people that get all the scoopers right. And by the way, there won't be any real spoilers here. We're just talking casting.
Do not spoil.
The casting for Fantastic Four is alleged to have been completed. Okay. Now, the first thing we have is they have apparently found their Human Torch. This is a young guy named, he's a new guy. Where is it? Oh,
he doesn't exist.
According to Daniel Richtman from The Direct, who's a big time scooper, he's always right. Actor Paul Mescal has been offered the role of Johnny Storm. He's an Emmy and Oscar Award nominated actor known for his roles in After Sun and Normal People. And he's slated to appear in Gladiator 2 by Ridley Scott, which has been a rumored movie since about a year after Gladiator came out. Probably before this guy was born. But he's an interesting looking guy. He looks like he's the part. I'm not familiar with any of his work, but if he's been nominated for Emmys and Oscars, then surely this is a win, right?
So at first, I thought that it was the guy that played Neville Longbottom.
No.
And it was not him.
No, it's
but
not.
They do bear a slight resemblance. Might be his cousin. I'm starting that rumor now.
It is not Neville Longbottom. But this appears to be a win. He's an up-and-coming actor. Some like real big things on his resume. Good choice. Also in the last week, they're saying it's a done deal. Adam Driver is going to be Reed Richards, which, like, look, I know people wanted John Krasinski, and they gave you that little tease in Multiverse of Madness. But like, look, Adam Driver, while I wouldn't have thought of him first off for Reed, he's one of the best actors on the planet right now.
He needs a win because, he's been in some poopay.
Well, this should be a win because the character of Reed Richards in the comics he's very complex. And so he's very layered. And like, the more I've thought about it, the more I think, yeah, actually that's perfect for Adam Driver. So that's a win. Who's your girl from Suicide Squad? Harley Quinn.
Margot Robbie?
Margot Robbie allegedly has been cast as Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman. So you've got the young up and coming guy as Human Torch, who's got already big things on his resume. Looks like he's a can't miss actor. You've got two of the biggest actors on the planet leading now the movie in Adam Driver and Margot Robbie.
Barbie.
Yeah, she's huge and she's good.
Which can't wait for our double feature where we watch Oppenheimer and then go watch Barbie. And review both.
I'm going to need all the caffeine. That sounds like fun, actually.
Minds are going to melt.
I'm into that. Let's do that. Seriously, we'll play it up. We'll do a double feature review on Oppenheimer and Barbie. It'll be the weirdest thing ever.
It will be so great.
They come out on the same weekend.
They do.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're
July
doing that.
21st.
Look forward to that, Pop Culture Pastor-ites. So look, all of those castings, you're like, okay, the Marvel Studios needs a win. Fantastic Four is an absolute anchor. Kevin Feige has said that the Fantastic Four is something he expects to anchor the series for a while, kind of like Avengers did in the Infinity series. Like, this is a huge movie that they're preparing, and the Fantastic Four, both traditionally in the comics and for the movie studios, is going to be huge, and they've got all this going in the right direction. And I'm like, great, this is going to be great. Fantastic Four is great. You want to know who allegedly is playing the Thing?
I am so on edge for this.
Benjamin Grimm, huge rock guy, Jewish from Brooklyn, I think. Is he from Brooklyn? And he's real complex character. He's got these like Jewish things going on with him, always with his character. But he turns into this big rock monstrous guy. He's an important part of the Fantastic Four, played by Mila Kunis.
Just Mila, or
you heard me, Mila Kunis. That's the rumor.
Because I had seen a rumor where it was going to be two actors, where one was going to be a male and they didn't know who the male was yet, and then one was Mila Kunis.
So when she turns into the monster, she turns into a he.
Maybe.
That?
I don't know. They didn't elaborate. They just said two thespians.
Listen, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it now. And like, look, this is stupid. This is just stupid. Okay, these scoopers are saying that someone inside the room there with Marvel, someone in the brain trust, they actually are openly have said in these talks where they're trying to figure all this out, that they want a diversity in the Fantastic Four cast. They're like, we really want diversity in the Fantastic Four cast. Now, listen, I'm not going to talk about that because whatever, like this is the thing that we're kind of parsing through now. Okay, I'm fine with diversity. But they actively are saying we don't know how to do it as well. It's like, we really want diversity in the Fantastic Four cast, but we don't know how to do it. Let me tell you what that is. That's not diversity. That's tokenism. When you're just trying to throw in diversity and you don't really have a plan or something that makes sense and is logical to do it, like, look, we're all about that. We had a plan for Logan, the Wolverine, how they could introduce him as a Canadian Indigenous person, and it didn't really change anything about his character. In fact, it fits with his character more. So we're for that. We don't mind race switching a character when it makes sense. Don't change the fabric of the character.
Yeah.
You know why? You know why Marvel's struggling right now?
Because it doesn't have Batman.
Contrarian Cody. No, Marvel's struggling because they have unsuccessfully been able to pinpoint why the first movies were successful, the first wave. We have too. We thought it was the story. We thought it was Thanos and the lead up and the little breadcrumbs that were leading to the next thing, to the next thing, the next thing. But you know what it really was?
Good storytelling.
They had reverence for the source material. Think back to all that first wave of movies. There's no big changes. They're reverent to the source material. That's what Feige was all about. He was a comic book nerd.
So now that you have laid out this,
yes,
now it's time for Contrarian Cody.
All right, Contrarian Cody, hit me with it.
So I had this thought while watching Star Wars episode 2 and 3 the other day. I didn't turn it on. My wife did. She really likes Jar Jar Binks. But But I'm watching it, and I'm like, these are better than the first time I watched them.
The prequels? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And compared to the new sequels, these might actually be a masterpiece, honestly.
Agreed. And I agree.
Like, so when people complain about in episode 8 that Luke Skywalker is too pouty and he wouldn't do this bull stuff, Yoda did it. Yoda did it in episode 3. So I think that when we have an expectation and we fall in love with a certain set of characters and actors, we just want that to continue. I never watched Solo because that's not Han Solo. That's not Harrison Ford. I only wanted to see Harrison Ford. That guy might be phenomenal as Han Solo. I don't know. But I only want Harrison Ford. So I think with some of this, we have grown accustomed to, well, we got Robert Downey Jr., we got Chris Evans, we got all these familiar faces. Well, they're all gone. They're gone. They're not coming back unless it's like, oh, multiverse Robert Downey Jr. Hello. So I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
We have grown accustomed to just this one type of storytelling and this certain cast and crew.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think you're wrong. And I don't think you're wrong to say that people are maybe being a little critically harsh of the MCU movies because they have an expectation. We've talked all about this when it comes to IP. That I think you run into this point once you get so far into your storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeing it with Lord of the Rings, Tolkien stuff, Rings of Power. We both liked Rings of Power.
It was great.
A lot of people didn't. And we didn't really understand. Anyways, so I don't think you're wrong, but I'm just speaking of the success as measured by the movie studios, the money making, right? So let me tell you what drove the Infinity Saga money wise. What drove that? Listen, my wife likes the MCU movies. She enjoys them, but she sees them once. And she doesn't really feel the need to watch them. She enjoys them, but she doesn't go back to them. Do you know who's going back for repeat viewings at the movie theater?
Who?
Comic book nerds, Cody. It's comic book nerds. They're the ones. I saw most of the MCU movies. I probably averaged 3 to 5 times with each movie of seeing it in the theater. Comic book nerds are the ones who are going it. So reverence for the source material in this case was a big deal for Marvel. It was a big deal for Marvel. DC is completely split now because you have Zack Snyder who's making what half the people think are good movies. And then the other half of them are like, this isn't reverent enough to the source material. You're changing too much, right? So you have that war going on. And I think that's what's destined to happen the farther you get away from the source material. I think that's what Marvel is experiencing right now. I think they're on the DC track.
And DC is on a whole nother trajectory now that Jimmy Gunn is available.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, if you're just throwing out diversity for diversity's sake, that's tokenism. And if you're going to do it, at least pick the character it makes more sense to do it.
Human Torch?
The Human Torch! He's nothing but a young guy who's wants to use his popularity, his celebrity. He's immature. Why not make the Human Torch a female? The Thing, Ben Grimm, is a complex, deep character. Don't do this. Don't do it just to do it. He's probably the most interesting character in the Fantastic Four. Reed Richards and him are probably neck and neck. But he's you're just losing everything that makes that character interesting by just doing tokenism with him, or maybe now her or them, which is what it really looks like maybe they're heading for.
Potentially.
that they're going to make the thing's transformation from the cosmic rays or however they end up doing it in this movie be like, oh, body confusion, identity confusion, which does that say we care about people that are struggling with that or that are in that life?
There might be a way to do that story. I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Do that story. Just don't do it in the Fantastic Four. Just do the Fantastic Four. Just do it. Just do the Fantastic Four.
Have a Squirrel Girl movie.
Right. Like, look, there are tons of people that would love a Squirrel Girl movie. And you can do all the things.
Yeah, I honestly don't know much about Squirrel Girl, except on Marvel Snap. If you play her card, a card goes in each slot.
Yeah, she's super annoying on Marvel Snap. But yeah, if you don't know, she's part of the LGBT community in the comic books. So
and
those characters exist.
Has a squirrel tail.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah,
I'll say it. She's like Spider-Man, but a girl and a squirrel.
Makes sense.
Sort of, yeah. Was she bit by a radioactive squirrel? I don't know her origin story.
Maybe on Comics Conclave in the future, we can learn about this.
That's a question for Scotty. We need Scotty. All right. We're here to talk about theology and the Mandalorian.
The Way meets This Is the Way. Oh, I'm excited.
Okay. Come on back. Okay, we're back. It's time. We're here to talk about, well, the Mandalorian, just kind of initially.
Din Djarin.
And specifically, we're going to get into kind of the theology and spirituality components, the religious components of the Mandalorian.
Which, I mean, Star Wars has always had that within it. The Jedi can be viewed as a religious sect or order.
They had a lot of like kind of Taoism, Buddhism type things going on with the Jedi.
And the Empire or whatever version of it, Nazis.
Yeah.
Always Nazis.
Yeah.
And when we get to Moff Gideon, such a Nazi.
Right.
Because when we get there, we'll get there. I have points, but yes.
Yeah, so the Mandalorian itself, kind of, it's weird because it didn't start off this way. It was in the background.
It was.
You knew that Din Djarin, the main character, was a part of this kind of fundamental belief system where he didn't remove his helmet, but we didn't get a lot into that. The first season and a half or so were very much like this Western.
Yeah.
And like Westerns, he's kind of traveling the universe alone. You know, him and Grogu, and they're just out there doing their thing. And then he meets up with other Mandalorians. And this season is where that side of it, the spiritual side, the religious side, really started playing into it. I mean, you have episodes titled "The Apostate," "The Convert." Yeah, so we really get into it in this season. Cody, I think we should tell the people what you thought of the season first and foremost, because we did have a review episode, but it was
while I was gone.
But it was mainly the Scots. Yeah,
yeah, the Scots were involved, and evidently not everyone loved this season. Head over heels in love with this season. Might be the best season of any Star Wars anything.
Yeah, this might be the contrarian Cody has ever been.
So for me, it hits in my geekdom or my nerddom, because like when you can really invest and get behind the origins and the myth of the characters and like actually start contemplating like, oh, this means this and this means that. And this relates to this in real life. And, this is like the geekiest I will get, probably.
Yeah, I appreciate the story for sure. I think my problems are with the delivery.
I loved it.
I feel like I love this storyline. I love everything about the lore and the background and the myth of the Mandalorians. I love everything about that, and I wish it would have developed it more. So it feels like it all happens too fast for me. Like if this had been part of the story from the beginning, where they were really kind of exploring the lore of Mandalore, the traditions and all those things, I just wanted more time with it, I think.
So I think I relate to it just in part because I think this is my preaching style. Is I will throw stuff out there. And for me, like, I can connect the dots. Not everyone that's listening may be able to connect the dots. And if you're not really listening, then you're going to be lost. But if you're someone that's actually seeking, if this is something that's actually of the utmost concern and you're paying attention, you're going to be like, oh, this is why this is mentioned and this is how it actually connects and relates. Throwing it out there and letting people actually contemplate over it I loved it.
That's an interesting point and a great reminder at the same time. It's an interesting point, and we've talked about this when we review things, that it is subjective. Just because the narrative doesn't connect with you doesn't mean it won't connect with someone else. The way they put the narrative together, and it's a good reminder for us all, and especially we're of the faith and we're pastors.
We are.
We put a lot of emphasis on sermons sometimes in speaking and preaching, and maybe we feel disappointed if it doesn't connect with some people. But like Jesus, like literally walks away from teachings that we hold in great reverence, and he says, "Yeah, they're going to go home and not really get that."
Oh yeah,
he knew that was happening, and that's an issue anytime with the way you're stringing together a narrative, the way you're putting together. You understand that that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And so, yeah, like, it doesn't bother me at all that you really enjoyed this season of The Mandalorian. I did not enjoy it. I just didn't think it was as good as season 1 and 2 for me. But that doesn't mean it's not good, because it's probably still the best Star Wars has been in a long time.
So I know for other people that really liked it, it is because we kind of get the culmination of Din Djarin and Din Grogu. Their relationship.
Yes.
I think that there's going to be multiple camps on Mandalorian season 3. And not that any of them are particularly correct and any of them are particularly wrong. It just is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just get into it. Where would you like to start here, Cody? Because I'm going to let you kind of lead where we go here, because this is more of something that you were paying attention to this the whole season.
Yes.
You would come in and be talking about the spirituality, and I'd be like, "Did you see Lizzo? That's insane."
I really wish that, so this, for the audience listening, it was between this and Ted Lasso, what was going to be the next watch along. But Ted Lasso lined up perfectly with where we had left off on the previous watch along, which was The Last of Us, and The Mandalorian was already a couple seasons in. But how I wish we would have done this as the watch along, just because in the moment I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so much of this and there's so much of that. And School Cody is not like one that goes back and rewatches.
Yeah. Well, let me give your gray cloud a silver lining.
Okay.
Watch-alongs, while we do try to analyze the story and get deeper into the meanings and all that and what they're trying to say, we do have to spend a part of that time kind of just reviewing each episode as the story is going.
Oh, yeah.
And so where we get to take a deep dive kind of into this certain subject within the story, is probably better suited for this. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the spirituality, the religious context.
Which we don't often do.
No.
because we usually are just about the pop culture, but the pop culture this time happens to be very religious based.
And it's interesting, even if you're not a person of faith, because the Mandalorians are people of faith. Like, this is like the little sect that Din Djarin is a part of, the Armorer, all these people. These are your fundies. They're your fundamentalists.
And to some, they might seem zealots, but we get introduced to a zealot group. So
you want to start with the old
go
stuff?
Hebrew Bible, if we're being PC. Old Testament, if you're unaware what the Hebrew Bible is.
Yeah. The Mandalorians have a lot in common with the Jewish people.
They do. So either you can go with the Exodus group, or you can go with the diaspora group, which is after the Hebrew people get dispersed throughout.
Is it the Assyrians?
Assyrian. Yeah. They're like, we're taking your best, and we're going to disperse them all across the countryside, so that way you guys can't mount up a rebellion. Yeah. You are no longer in your home. You are people that, because the land does play a huge role within the Jewish faith, because this is the promised land. This is the land flowing with milk and honey, the land that God picked out himself for all of the Israelites.
Yeah. And if you're listening and you're not someone who's a Christian or a Jew, or you just don't have the knowledge of that, and you've wondered, why is there so much fighting in Israel and around there and over that land? Well, it's because it goes back a long time. Long time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's pretty much always been kind of conflicted over because it's important land to many people. And
the three Abrahamic faiths, it is.
Yeah, the diaspora, as Cody refers to, is that the Jews have been dispersed many times. Mm-hmm. And so someone would conquer them, and then they would get intentionally dispersed out of the area. They would come back, then they would get dispersed, and they would come back.
And not all of them would come back.
No, they've been dispersed throughout the world as we know it today. But the diaspora, that matches up with the Mandalorians, because the Empire destroys what they think their homeworld.
Mandalore is a wasteland, and so they have to go throughout the galaxy that's far, far away. And with like the Jewish people that were dispersed, oftentimes those that conquered them would be like, why aren't you singing your pretty songs of faith? And asking them about why aren't they doing this tradition and that tradition. And oftentimes they would say, in the Old Testament, we get it, that we're not in our homeland.
Yeah.
And so the land is vital. And within the Mandalore.
Yeah, let's cross this over. Yeah.
Within their faith, there's groups that they're like, well, now that Mandalore is a wasteland, some of these traditions we can't do. We're not going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to become more like the culture that we're in. And there's other groups that are like, well, back on Mandalore, we did this. We can't do that now, but we still hold true to the core principles.
Yeah. So Mandalore in its prime has a royal family.
It does.
That Bo-Katan Kryze is a part of. She actually says this season. She says, I took the creed. I was showered with gifts. The rituals were all just theater for our subjects. They loved watching the princess recite the Mandalorian tenets as her father watched proudly, such a heartwarming spectacle, she says sarcastically. But so like there were people just like what faith does here when it gets kind of big. Mm-hmm. Is there's portions of it that become like kind of lukewarm, portions of it that remain kind of steadily in like the really fundamental beginnings of it. And so they let on that even before they get dispersed, that split, that rift was happening. And of course, when the Empire comes in and destroys Mandalore, which we get some flashbacks of that in season 2 and in season 3, or actually it was in Book of Boba Fett, I think, not season 2. I get confused because there was that couple episodes in Book of Boba Fett that kind of focused
that
on
were
this.
The Mandalorian
2.5.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we get some shots of that, and they're dispersed. They're dispersed throughout the galaxy. And as Cody said, some of them, that's the nail in the coffin for the faith, the creed.
So within the Hebrew, because it's not only just a religion, it's a race and nationality, a lot of different things that we throw around, but there are non-practicing, non-believing Jewish people in the world today.
Yeah.
They are Jewish by birth. They don't have the faith component.
Israel itself has a very largely growing secular population, especially in the cities, the young people, millennials on down, Tel Aviv, the cities on the coast there, a large secular population. There's a secularization going on in Israel, in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
So maybe in the real world, it's reflected again, this kind of balance. Now, if Bo-Katan and her ilk went with like, well, we're done with this, started taking off their helmets, Din Djarin and the fundamental group here that he's a part of, this is the way.
This is the way.
The people that stick to the creed, they're even more, what's the word, radical? Or it's not radical because it's more of we're hardline going to stick with the traditions, the creed.
Which
orthodox, maybe.
Orthodox would be a good word. You do get this split, even in before Jesus is walking around, but even while Jesus is walking around, there's many different groups, and they have splits based on many different things. But there's a group that they might be the most fascinating group, and that is the Essenes. Mm-hmm. They separate themselves from the culture. They're like, we are going to stay strict fundamentally to the scriptures, and we're just going to live in isolation.
Wow.
We're just doing it because the rest of you heathens can't be around you.
And so we get from that group, they're always like living, they're in a city, they're underground. Mm-hmm. In this season, they're in like caves on some planet. And they're really just kind of like this sect, this group that's kind of hidden and very much like that. Very much like that.
Within this, and we see it with Din Djarin himself, within the Jewish faith, there's kosher law, ritually clean and being ritually unclean. And because Din removed his helmet, he was unclean. Which if you and I, listener, become friends, you will hear me say, like, when you're sick, unclean, and like I'll like put up a cross at you. That's partially because of like the Hebrew Bible rituals that Jesus kind of attacks with the Pharisees, and also because of Nick Kroll's character on The League. He did that as well. So
Din Djarin's story and the sect, the people that say this is the way, the hardliners, they very much have a connection to this old kind of Jewish heritage as well of the diaspora. There's a scene where in this season where they go back to Mandalore. It's Bo-Katan and it's Din Djarin. And Bo-Katan is kind of like, I don't know if maybe this is in season 2. I don't remember, but Bo-Katan's kind of challenging him about this hard line of the faith. And he says this line. He says, without the creed, what are we? Our people are scattered like stars in the galaxy. The creed is how we survived. And I find it interesting, and I don't know if you have anything you want to say about this, but the connection to identity, that this was their identity. And it's interesting because we would think in our highly individualized society that our identity is more about us as individuals. And the Mandalorians are more about like, no. Actually, your identity is attached to this connection we have with each other and the place, right?
Yeah. Faith, community.
And so if our identity is actually in our connection to each other, in our unity, and we no longer have the place, then we're not going to remove our helmets, even now, more so now, because it will make us more individualistic. Now we don't have the tie to the land.
Yeah.
And now we're going to so it's even more important, keep your helmet on.
Another thing that connects is there was an episode called The Spies.
Are you going to tell me who the other spy was? Because we get one spy in that episode, unless I miss something.
Okay, so who was the spy?
The spy was the girl that's in the New Republic, who's actually working for, Moff Gideon. She talks to Moff Gideon in that episode, right? By way of, Star Wars phone call.
So that is a spy for one side.
Yeah.
But
do we ever get another spy?
There's rumors of other spies.
Okay, but the episode is called Spies, and we didn't get another spy. So is there something I'm missing theologically?
It was rumored on scooping websites that maybe the armor,
which they were wrong.
Yes, could have been someone. The episode that was the spies plural was episode 7 of this season. Isn't this where they actually go back to scout out Mandalore?
Yeah, so they go back. That's when they meet up with the Mandalorians that have been there the whole time.
Okay, so this is where the biblical thing comes in. Exodus. Moses sends spies. All of them go there
to go look at the land.
To go look at the promised land, and only 2 come back saying it is good land that we can take. Caleb and Joshua. They are the ones that say, let's do it. And if the Israelites would listen, we would not have had 40 years in the wilderness. But they were jabronis and they did not listen. They were afraid. And in this instance, we do have 2 people that went to Mandalore before. The whole group shows up in this episode, but and Din Djarin, and now I'm going to keep referring to him as Din Grogu.
Naturally.
And they explore, and they're like, oh, it's still, you could build back here. It's just a dump, but it's not toxic. It's all good.
So is Din Djarin the spy? Is he the second spy?
I would say so.
Okay. If we're going Old Testament Torah stuff.
Because he kind of becomes an impromptu kind of leader, kind of like Joshua. And so, yeah, I would say so.
Okay. All right. Hey, I'm here for it. Is there anything to do with the older kind of Hebrew traditional stuff that we want to talk about? We talk diaspora. They have an oral tradition.
They do have an oral tradition, which for most of the Hebrew faith before King David, it was primarily an oral tradition. It's not until many years later that the Pentateuch and other books get written down.
I do like, maybe this isn't the time for the discussion. Where does the mythosaur fit into all this?
Okay. So, it could go in several places, but with especially the Hebrew faith, that knowledge of knowing that there are people like Bo-Katan that are like, oh, it was a great story for kids. Within the faith and even within Christianity, we have people that are like, oh, the miracles and stuff, that great story for kids. So within spiritual development, there is something that is important, and that is mysterium tremendum. which is awe-inspiring mystery. So Moses telling the Israelites, I am, was in a burning bush. People might have said, oh, that's a great vision to have. Like, oh, we know God's on our side. So going back to that scene with Bo-Katan in the armor where she tells her that I saw the mythosaur. And the armor kind of was like, oh, if you have a vision, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
But she literally saw it. And there probably were people that when Moses was like, there was a burning bush that didn't get consumed by the flames.
Yeah, it was weird in the moment because I don't know that a lot of people caught that the armorer's like, oh, nice, he had a vision. Like, no.
I mean, we have it within faith quite frequently. Like we have traditions of people saying, no, I actually saw the Virgin Mary. It was her indeed in the flesh. They're like, oh, you had a vision. That's great. And so at times we can kind of brush off, have like movings of the spirit, like, oh, that's good. Whatever. Even I'll go with the calling of Samuel. He keeps thinking that he's hearing someone else's voice, not God's voice. That first couple times the priest brushes it off like, oh, just go to bed. But then finally he's like, oh, God's talking to you. You need to actually listen and converse with God. It kind of goes into like the spiritual formation, the spiritual development portion, but it goes into the myth portion. And within religious groups, like with religious scholars, I should say, like myth sounds like a dirty word because usually we're like, oh, our connotation, it's something made up long ago, not relevant. The myth of Thor and Odin, that's great. I love it. But within scholarly, religious scholars, that it is usually the tradition of a group that could relate to actual events, especially, again, for that religious group. And it usually starts off in an oral tradition. So myth just is like, oh, this is kind of the fundamental, you need to know this.
Yeah. And in that way, I think it's important to point out that because it's a storytelling tradition, that it's not going to be like, I think some people have trouble outside of Christianity when they start reading the Gospels. And you have the 4 Gospels, and there's many events that are exactly the same. But there's some events that play out a little differently in each Gospel. They have little details that are different. That's a problem for some people.
Jesus is flipping a table at the beginning of one and flipping it at the end of 3. And so...
But I think that something that people don't understand about our ancient brethren is that, the storytelling piece of that is actually normal.
Yes.
And that it's myth, but not in the way, like you said that we determined that to be like not real.
Yeah.
But it's myth because it was storytelling tradition. And so there's myth and legends, I think. I think we call things like Thor and Odin myth sometime, and what we really mean is legend.
Yes. So it's a narrative storytelling device that relates to a faith community. And now I'm really intrigued because there was rumors and talk of we're going to have a Star Wars story set way back in the past, around like the start of the Mandalorians. Like, holy cannoli, that would be mind blowing.
I'm going to ask you where you think this is going with Bo-Katan Kryze. Where you think like. Is that story, if that story is just done or are they going to continue on? I tend to think it's going to continue on because I don't think we're done with this storyline yet because Bo-Katan's transition is really super interesting and fascinating in this season because she's very much, kind of okay boomerish to the fundamental parts of this creed. But like what we see in this season especially is this gradual kind of respect. She sees the mythosaur. There's always the part where the unbeliever sees the impossible.
Yes. And so for her, growing up and being, I guess, behind the curtain, because she was part of the royal family, which would be a royal priestly family at that, she just took it as like, oh, this is a story we tell the kids. But now she has her mysterium tremendum moment of, this is an awe-inspiring mystery. I can't even begin to comprehend it. Like, I think back to the prophets whenever they got their call to being a prophet. It is usually like something like out of the blue, and Isaiah's at a loss for words, and he realizes how unclean and how wrong he was before. And now she's like, oh, no, there's something to this.
Yeah. Okay. So like the connection there is, and this is what I'm getting at. What's in whatever tremendum?
Mysterium tremendum.
The mysterium tremendum. Man, Cody's got the intellectual side of this. There's that moment where they see things, and so like she's just not just down on the supernatural, fantastical stuff as part of her creed. She's down at it all, because what do Mandalorians believe about each other? That there's something about when they're united, when they're together, but she's given up on that. Mm-hmm. Remember, when we see her in this season, she's in like a castle all by herself.
She is completely alone.
And she's completely given up on everything about the creed. Everything about what made Mandalorians Mandalorians. Mm-hmm. And it all starts to change when she sees the mysterium tremendum. What'd you say it was?
Mysterium tremendum.
Yes. She sees the mythosaur.
She sees the mythosaur.
That's impossible. And if you see the impossible made possible, then you got to start re-examining all the other things that are slightly less than impossible, right? Jesus did this with healings and miracles. Mm-hmm. That's all they were for, was so that people would see them, and then they have to, like, look, Cody, if someone walked in here and died of a heart attack, and I raised him, he died, he was flatlining, and I said, hey, brother, get up and walk, and he got up and was fine, you would pay close attention to everything coming out of my mouth.
Oh, yeah. Immediately becomes something you have to wrestle with.
Yes.
And the thing about wrestling is you can't do it from far away. You have to get up close and personal and get in it. At times, Bo-Katan might be really walking the way, but then there's times that she might be kind of butting heads with it still, but she's actually back into the faith.
Yeah. So I'm really intrigued. Do you think the story is neatly wrapped up and they'll just go, Mandalorian and Grogu on the road again, and it's a road show and we kind of set that to the side? Or do you think there's more story to tell there? Like, what are they going to do with that?
I'm really intrigued just because there's at least 3 groups of Mandalorians there now. And
there's more that we didn't get into, right?
There's the armorer and that fundamental group. And I think there's still room for someone that would be the quote unquote chosen one to appear. Bo-Katan has some things with her that might lead you to having her kind of be like that. And so for me, she might be more of a King David character.
Oh, okay.
There's a reason that the Republic or the Empire or whoever we are at this current moment was wanting Mandalore.
The King David thing is interesting.
It is.
Because will she rebuild the temple? He wanted to, but he doesn't. It's his son that does it.
Yeah.
So this will be interesting. I'm curious. Like,
and
the full disclosure, she was the most interesting character to me this season.
The Forge would be the substitute for the temple, which, since the Forge was still standing, it might be more like the Maccabees. Mm-hmm. We got to ritually cleanse this and make it clean, and that will restore a sense of vision and hope within the land, that we have our identity back.
What do we want to talk about next? How do you want to swing this conversation?
So within like New Testament, this is a good look at like the early church, I feel, just because there is conflict. Within the early church, you have conflict between those that were Jewish first and those that were Gentiles that were coming to the faith. Mm-hmm. What do they have to do? Does it have to look exactly like this? Do we have to keep all the rules and traditions? And do you have to be ritually clean? Can you eat this? Can you remove your helmet? Within the book of Acts, we have the meetings of between those that were born Jewish that followed Jesus in the way, because that's what it's known as early on. It's not Christianity. It is known as the way. And so I love that the motto is, this is the way for the Mandalorians, just because that's an easy tie back. Those that were born Jewish, those that were born Gentiles, there's a lot of conflict and strife, but they eventually come to a place of unity that like, oh, we can keep with the old practices if we want to. And there's groups within us that will not do the old practices, but they are believing and doing the same things, the rituals that we deem as important and necessary, which one of those rituals, which kind of was a thing in the Old Testament, but it didn't have the meaning and the significance as it does in the New Testament, and that it does within this community, the baptism.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. That's literally how this season starts. Like, kids are being baptized, and then like some weird shark alligator thing comes out of the water.
Well, and someone who may not be in the know may think, oh, that's a Christian thing, right? And I was like, well, actually, no, it's a Jewish thing. They called it mikvahs. Mm-hmm. They did it a little differently. They did it more often.
Yes.
Whereas the Christian believes you get baptized in water once.
It's a one-time deal. It's a outward sign of an inward change for Christianity, where it was more of a ritual cleansing.
Yeah. So the Mandalorian version is a lot more like the Jewish version, because that's what kind of a mikvah was. It was like a ritual cleansing, was it not?
So for me, I think if you adhere to the tenets of the faith, it could be just a one-time thing.
It could be.
Where even if there is some stumbling, you don't have to be ritually cleansed. For that particular sect, it was just the removing of the helmet. But now that the armor is like, oh, Bo-Katan has united us both, I don't know if it's that big of a deal. It could be like when Peter had his vision of food that was ritually unclean.
Yeah.
And, now we can eat the ritually unclean food as well as the ritually kosher food.
The vision aspect of that is interesting too, because did Bo-Katan really see the mythosaur? We think she saw a mythosaur. It looked pretty real. The armor believes it was a vision. Does it really matter? Does it really matter? The whole coming together of the Mandalorians in this, it's all very early church too, because you have like in Christianity, in early Christianity, you have the Gentiles and the Jews and those people conflicting, coming together. Remember that Din Djarin, Boba Fett, they're Gentiles.
Yes.
They are not real Mandalorians. And some of that is like, you can see like, who is it? The Axel guy. The guy that was formerly in Bo-Katan's crew, who's leading them after she gets kicked out or whatever. He kind of disdainfully says, as some of the others do, it's like, I'm a true Mandalorian. Like, y'all just picked it up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm from, like there's this disdain they have for their, quote, Gentile population of Mandalorians.
Which, like in Jewish culture, to be an actual Jewish person, you have to be born from a Jewish mother. That's how the lineage works.
Yeah.
For you to become Jewish, You have to be born of a Jewish mother.
So it was super fascinating to see through this season how they are navigating this. There's fighting, there's bad feelings, there's arguing, but that at the end of the day, spurred on, of course, by Bo-Katan's vision, her sighting of the mythosaur and the armor, and that them getting behind Bo-Katan with the armorer's help. She's a big part of that. But this idea that the most important thing was like, hey, the unity. This is what makes us strong. That even though we've been exterminated, we've been scattered throughout the galaxy in the diaspora, we bring back what's left, and we're powerful together.
So it's amazing to me that Din Djarin is so steadfast to this tradition, even though that he wasn't born into it. He was kind of adopted into it, that he keeps it more so than the others that were born into it, like Bo-Katan. I really appreciate how within this show, they really don't cast Din Djarin in a negative light for being someone that is steadfast to the faith tradition. Like, he even adapts, because when we first see him, everyone should be doing this. And now it's, I'm going to do this for myself and the community that I'm a part of. And if you don't do it, but are still practicing the way, I support you.
Yeah. Jon Favreau, the writer of The Mandalorian, is, you may be interested to know, his mother was of Jewish descent, Russian Jewish descent, and his father is Catholic.
Ooh, so he has two strong faith traditions.
Yeah, Favreau dropped out of Hebrew school, in fact, to pursue acting. And there's a lot of information out there where people bring attention to the fact that The Mandalorian, in fact, there's an article here on The Forward, which is a Jewish independent nonprofit magazine, internet magazine, that asks in a headline, is The Mandalorian the most Jewish sci-fi series ever?
Yes.
In the first paragraph, this guy writes, and this is that this season of The Mandalorian started with a journey to a space mikveh and ended with a rekindling of the temple menorah. And so, yeah, this all kind of fits. And man, Jon Favreau hasn't talked a lot about it. Like, this hasn't come out in interview form, because that's kind of what I was looking for when I stumbled upon this article.
I kind of don't want him to.
Yeah, explain. I'm not as into like the traditional Jewish stuff.
I love the open for interpretation.
Okay.
Mindset that like, oh, this can be a lot of different things. But knowing his background, those are two faith traditions that have liturgy. They have the biblical concepts that you have to follow. They have the historical traditional concepts you have to follow. And there's a lot of mystery within both of those traditions. And things that we don't fully comprehend, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, just take the Eucharist, for example, which is communion to us Protestant folks. But it literally turns into the body and blood of Jesus. That's what it is. It's nothing else. It's not bread. It's not wine. It is the body and blood. After the priest blesses it, that's what it becomes. When they clean out the chalice, they use holy water. The priest has to drink it, and he wipes with a special garment that is only meant to touch the communion cup. You don't waste the blood of Jesus. So, like, as he's cleaning it and he drinks that water, it's just because there could be residue of the blood of Jesus, and you don't waste the blood of Jesus. The bread, it has a special box that it goes into, the host, and like, it's treated sacred. Knowing what is sacred within the Mandalorian sect is important for like spiritual development and spiritual formation. The creeds are important. Now, a lot of Protestant churches don't have creeds. Some do. The closer you are to the Catholic faith, the more likely it is. But like if you broke off from this group and that broke off from another group that eventually broke off from the Lutherans and broke off from the Catholics, then you probably don't. Non-denominational churches usually don't. Yep. But creeds are important because it states what you believe in. And so the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, are all creeds. And within this show, they have creeds. They had the Mandalorian Creed. And so
this is the way.
This is the way.
And I do like that this, I'd only like to hear Jon Favreau speak on it because I want to know that this is what it is, because it could answer some questions.
Oh, yeah, it could.
Remember back to, like, we see Bo-Katan as this leader now, and like, oh, Mandalore's back, Bo-Katan's the leader. But is she? Because if you go all the way back to episode 1 of The Mandalorian, Grogu is found in a basket. Mm-hmm. Much like another Jewish hero by the name of Moses.
And
is Grogu Moses? Is he the future
leader
of
one?
the Mandalorians?
Oh, yeah. So that's why I worded it when you asked me what the next step in the story is.
Yeah.
I don't think Bo-Katan is the savior of the story.
Right.
She is maybe just the unifier, maybe a King David-like figure or a Maccabee figure, but
yeah,
I think we get Grogu.
Yeah. It's cool. It's really cool and fun to think about, and I hope everybody has stayed with us and enjoyed us kind of geeking out on the theology of this here.
And so to kind of conclude everything, I loved the last battle scene with Moff Gideon, which back to the Nazi thing with Moff Gideon, like people are like, oh, Nazis were a Christian faith organization. No, no, they're not.
No.
Hitler purposely went after like artifacts that went back to Thor, like Norse mythology. He had a bunch of different mythologies he was borrowing from. That's what the Nazis did. That's what Moff Gideon did, because he had Jedi stuff. Mm-hmm. He had Mandalorian stuff.
He was going back for the artifacts.
He was going for all of it.
And he didn't know how to use it. So people complained about the clones. Like, what was he going to do with those clones? He's like, he didn't know.
And
he's just grasping at straws.
Didn't either.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the last connection to the Jewish history, is the connection to Nazi Germany. The biblical allegories are all over Star Wars. It's not abnormal. We talked a lot about the religious traditions that make their way into Star Wars, but this is their first foray, and to make the Mandalorians kind of like the Jewish tradition inspiration in the Star Wars universe is cool. This is from quote from journalist and author Tamar Herman, who's Jewish. They say, I feel like it's so obvious in retrospect. The whole thing started out of inspiration from the Third Reich, the Empire. Mm-hmm. So for there to be Jewish representation somewhere in the story, it's almost offensive that it's taken this long. Yes. And so here we are. That's what the Mandalorians represent. The great purge, it's called in the show. The Holocaust in our history, in our world. And the Mandalorians represent this population clearly coming from a place we don't know for sure, but we assume that Jon Favreau has been inspired from his Jewish heritage.
Yes.
His mother's Jewish heritage. I don't know if he adheres or what his life's like, but clearly that made its way into the Mandalorians.
So in that final fight scene before the cruiser comes crashing through and kills Moff Gideon, should kill Moff Gideon. If Moff comes back, I'll be upset. But Bo-Katan, like, he's trash talking her, and she's like, well, Mandalorians actually are stronger together. Mm-hmm. And then boom, there's Din and all the Dins. Dins are there, and they defeat Moff Gideon, and Grogu does like his best Groot and protects them from fire and calamity.
And they retake the land.
They do.
And they'll fall into that trap probably of thinking that the land was what did it. But it was them. It was them as a people and their creeds and their traditions that united them. It's good stuff. Hey, what did you think about The Mandalorian Season 3? Did you see the spiritual inlines of the story?
And there's probably a lot that we missed.
We could sit here for 3 hours and talk about this.
And if I was rewatching these episodes, it would easily go that full 3 hours.
So what do we miss? Point them out to us. Point out other religious allegories you saw in the show. It was fun watching that way for us. So as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe and give us reviews. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, all that stuff. Share. We're coming off the most downloads we've ever had in a week, in 2 weeks. And
that's bananas.
We're growing exponentially, and that's thanks to just how faithful you listeners are. So we thank you for that, and how much you share us. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you next time.
Pop Culture Pastor.